Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Emefiele bows to pressure, says old Naira notes legal tender. Despite bearing the brunt occasioned by the Naira redesign policy, Nigerians support CBN's cashless policy, says the presidency. We have evidence PDP accuses Gombe governor plotting to rig gubernatorial poll. And outside of Nigeria, Eritrea cautions Sudan over foreign meddling. And United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken due to visit Ethiopia and Niger. While Mustafa, development policy analyst, and much later would have Ademola Bayonle, a political analyst and chairman of DAB Foundation. They will be our guests today on PHQ. I am Benga Borowa. Stay with us. Politics Headquarters. We'll be right back. The Central Bank of Nigeria on Monday finally announced that old Naira notes will continue to be legal tender until the 31st of December 2023. The CBN's decision came on the back of a Supreme Court order on the continued usage of the old notes. The decision has been met with furious reactions from Nigerians who've been subjected to some tough times as a result of the scarcity caused by the CBN policy. On Monday, the presidency also denied it had a hand in the failure of the CBN and Attorney General of the Federation to follow the Supreme Court's orders. As Nigerians await the reintroduction of the old notes back into the economy, we analyze this policy, its purported failure, and what the central bank could have done better. Joining me for this discussion, I have Madam Hawa Mustafa. She's a development policy analyst. She joins us from Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. A warm welcome to you, Madam. Madam, it's exactly 10 days after the Supreme Court judgment mandated the use of old 1,000 Naira and 500 Naira legal notes to remain legal tender till 2023, December 31st. The Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Godwin Emefiele on Monday bowed to pressure and officially ordered commercial banks to comply with the court verdict. Why did it take 10 days to do this, and what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, I have to say that the functions of the Central Bank of Nigeria, unfortunately, is being shifted away from from its primary role or its primary function of an independent and autonomous manager of the economy to be muddled with politics. What happened within the last 10 days, in fact, what has been happening since December till now is a function of the primary function of the CBN, unfortunately being muddled up with politics. Good intention being politicized and implementation also, seeming to be being wrongly interpreted because of the faulty impression that or faulty signal that had emanated from the CBN. So coming back to the last 10 days, I think initially the CBN had a good intention around the monetary policy of withdrawing the old notes and then dispensing of new currency, but that along the way, politics muddled up. And I think initially the CBN was trying to flex its model and insist on its primary function as stipulated in the 2007 CBN Act as an independent and autonomous body, which is also primarily charged with management of liquidity. I think initially it was trying to muzzle up its role in that regard, but along the way, politics did the CBN, I must say, and the CBN had to bow to the pressure that the political terrain had imposed upon it. So I think this is what happened. Okay. It's not so much as if, yeah.
Now, Madam,
it's much more around politics muddling up and then the CBN buying down to the pressure of politics.
You did admit it is a brilliant idea, but it got muddled up in politics and implementation was poor. But now that we've seen a reversal, albeit till December 31st, of this policy, would it still have its intended purposes? Would it still fulfill its intended purpose? And knowing that right now and until the end of the year, we'll have both the new and the old notes in circulation. Can we say that the policy has failed in that regards?
No, the policy certainly has not failed. If there's anything, I think politics also helped to reorder the CBN, not necessarily to remove it from its primary function, but to also put some sensitivity and some sensibility into the implementation of the policy. And what do I mean by that? Yes, it is true that it's a global practice and it's a normal thing for the CBN in any country every 5 to 8 years, usually, to review, its currency, either to change in terms of color, in terms of whatever it has to do to renew its currency. And the whole idea of doing this oftentimes is when there is a liquidity problem in the country. And I think this is what CBN initially wanted to do. But the method of implementation was faulty. And that is where the cry and the whole trouble, the whole noise, and the whole politics was now given a leeway, to have access to have a say into what the CBN was doing. And so given the time from now till December, I think it is within normal standard, because it was initially the politics that went into the CBN function, unfortunately, that made the CBN to say, look, we give you 90 days, or in fact, even less than 90 days, to withdraw all the old currency and renew and give you the new and begin to implement the use of new currency. I think that was very brash.
It was too short of a time.
That was not clearly, deeply thought of. Considering the uniqueness of our kind of economy, uniqueness in the sense that we have the bulk of our population are in the rural community. The bulk, about 80% of our economy, is in the informal sector, characterized with a lot of vulnerability, small and microfinancing and trading, and the banking industry is not as a commonplace, particularly in the rural communities, as it is in the urban communities. And these people use money; they don't use cowries. So I think it was a well thought out policy, but unfortunately the implementation was highly politicized, both from the side of the CBN and of course from the intervention that we also got from outside, especially from the politicians outside. So leaving it now, extending the period, of the legality of the use of the old currency till 31st of December, for me, I think it is just within normal, it is standard, and it is good. That the CBN also must have taken a second thought, probably compelled or by the ruling of the court, to say that, look, and then of course the pressure and the sufferings of the people, any blind person could see it, to say that no, this is not right, we need to go back and review, or at least accept. And in accepting the verdict of the court, I think it also shows that it is also human beings that are the CBN, and CBN is not for CBN people, it's also for Nigerians. So I think for them to have had that mistake, it doesn't make the CBN any weaker. It doesn't make anybody any stronger. It just shows that the rule of law is functioning, and that government agencies are not meant for a few individuals. They are meant for Nigerians. And if it's not working, even the Constitution, there's no law that is not made for human beings. And if at any point in time the implementation of such law, seems to be detrimental to the service or to the people that it is supposed to serve, then why not? You stop, you review, you make your assessment, and then you reorganize in such a way that people's interest comes first.
Now, I'm going to, my next question will be informed by two very important things you mentioned in your submission. You talked about the underbanked in the rural areas, and you also mentioned the untold hardship it has brought upon the generality of Nigerians. Now, having the luxury of hindsight and seeing what this policy caused, I mean, even the banking system was overwhelmed. There were people that made transfers, they didn't get it. It seemed like there was a lot of pressure on the system. And then the rural folks on the bank in the rural area and the informal economy, in which a lot of them depend on cash transactions, they were affected. Some businesses have been closed as a result of this policy. Now, with the luxury of hindsight and looking back, do you think it was a thoroughly thought through idea to introduce this policy and its implementation phase? Did they not troubleshoot or preempt or see these obstacles in the way when they were thinking about this? I know you're not in the CBN, but from what you've seen so far.
Again, there are two things involved here. There is the policy and there is the implementation of the policy. The policy by itself is a good idea because I think the principal motive behind the policy, which came from the CBN, is the idea of mopping up excess liquidity that is outside the banking vaults. Over 80% of cash, that is supposed to be domiciled within the banking vault is outside the banking vault. And this is not good for the economy because it is not circulating for production. It is not circulating, it is not encouraging economic growth. So the idea of mopping that excess as a policy is good. However, the problematic here is the implementation of the policy. Now, what do I mean? What are we saying about the implementation of the policy? And that is where the implementation was not well thought out. How do you implement? First of all, you need to make a transition process. And the transition process should take into consideration what do we need? How much currency do we need? How much of it do we use? And who are the people that use cash? To what extent do they use cash? What do they need this cash for? So how is this policy? What is the level of this policy that is going to ensure that those people who depend mostly on the use of cash have access to that cash? I think initially this idea of also let's have 20,000 Naira maximum withdrawal per day. I think that was an idea that possibly was expected to address that part that say that of the informal sector and their petty and the use of petty cash daily. Because I mean, let's be candid. Even an average worker in Nigeria, how much do you earn? On the average in a month. So to say that you have a limit of 20,000 Naira withdrawal daily in a month of about 30 days, that's talking about 600,000 Naira withdrawal in a month. How many Nigerians? I can bet that at least 60 to 70% of Nigerians do not earn that much in a month. Probably not even half of that in a month. The idea, the thing also is that, so you have this policy, then you have also made the provision to say that, okay, people can withdraw this amount. But then they go to the banks and the money is not there. So you have devised a plan, but then you do not also create the infrastructure, or you do not create, the infrastructure, the necessary facility that is going to make that policy to function. And that's where the problem is, and that is what Nigerians were angry about. If after the policy was enacted, people could go to the bank at any ATM at any time and withdraw your limit of 20,000 Naira without the long queue, without the frustrations that we were seeing every day, that would have made some sense. Secondly, if people could also use the other alternative of electronic transfer, to transfer money, and then people could also access your bank, your statements and all the details. I mean, if electronic transfer or electronic banking was functional, that also would have made a lot of sense. So before the implementation, what are the issues with electronic banking? What were the challenges? These are the things that CBN unfortunately did not think about thoroughly, because CBN probably worked alone. And in implementing a program like this, the CBN cannot work alone. The CBN must collaborate with the Ministry of Communications and Telecommunications, particularly, working with the network providers. The CBN must also see what are the other, functional, partners that will help to make this policy very successful. I think this was not well thought out, because look at what most of the banks were suffering. Suddenly there's a heavy traffic, and that was also weakening, or that created a kind of exposure of the weakness of the wristband. I think so to say that the banks were already functioning with. Because in terms of access, or people trying to access electronic banking, I think we saw an unprecedented rise of more than 200% within the last 3 months compared to where we were sometime around November.
It did push people towards electronic banking. Now, Madam Hawa Mustafa, you've responded brilliantly, but looking at where we are now, as at today, what are some of the negative consequences of that policy and its weak implementation? Not weak implementation, it's the adverse effects of its implementation on our economy. Would you say the pros override the cons?
You see, there are two categories of Nigerians. So those that are, like I say again, let me go back to the informal economy. To those in small businesses, the businesses really suffered. For the person who is selling probably yam balls or meat bean cake on the street, whose total capital is about 5,000 naira or 10,000 naira, who needs to take transport of about 300 naira to 500 naira a day to commute herself between her market to her home and to other, small areas. To these persons who constitute the bulk of Nigerians, the poor who constitute the bulk, the petty traders, the small microcredit, the micro businesses, I think this policy was unfortunately not in their favor. This policy to this category of people created more suffering than anything, than gains for them. However, to big businesses, I think in some way it was not so much of a problem, because we didn't hear we hardly heard big businesses complaining about the policy, because they could easily do their transfer. They could even easily have access to bank manager's office for whatever amount of transfers they wanted to do. Big bank officials could even come to their offices or to their homes, collect their checks for transfer, collect whatever. So for that big category, which constitutes probably less than 10% of the economic population, to them this policy was hardly a biter. But to the majority, for goodness sake, we saw the kinds of long queues we had on the streets every day. We saw the kinds of drama. We saw the kind of unfortunate incidences we were seeing. How many of the VIPs did we see fighting? How many of the VIPs' children did we see struggling to look for money in all the bank queues? All the people, all the times we saw the unfortunate dramatic incidences, the negative incidences that we saw in this process. They were all about, in fact, even the middle class was hardly even involved. They were mostly about the poor, the petty trader, the shoe shiner, the bus conductor, the person who needed to commute, the cleaner, whose office did not know however you came to work. But then you had to come to work. And you had to come to work because you needed to take commercial transportation. I needed to pay 100 naira, 200 naira, and you could not get it. The person who, even if somebody was going to assist you with money, the person would say, okay, send me your bank account. I don't have cash. Send you 3,000, send you 5,000 naira. The students, whose parents probably would send them weekly pocket money, not by cash, but by electronic transfer. It's either you are not receiving the alert on time, or okay, you have received the money, you cannot access your money from the ATM. So these are the majority of the people who had to suffer from the brunt of this, or who had to suffer from this ill-thought implementation or weak implementation of this policy. And I think that, unfortunately, these incidences, unfortunately, thereby put a dark cloud in the otherwise well-intended policy, and kind of rubbish the policy and put the CBN into ridicule, that it had to take a court of law to force the CBN, which is supposed to be made of professionals. The CBN has a monetary planning committee, which is expected to have thought out this whole pros and cons of this policy, understanding the nature of the Nigerian economy, understanding the nature of the people of Nigeria, how the informal economy particularly runs, because that is the backbone of our economy. And that they did not, the plan was thought out as if we are all some VIPs that just sit in our houses. We all have access to Android phone. We can just easily do our transfer or call up a bank manager and say, please do this transfer for me, and so on and so forth. And I think that is what makes the whole process so unfortunate, that we have a very terrible way of putting mud on a very beautiful thing.
Now,
so,
Madam Hawa Mustafa, just before we wrap
Yeah.
up this conversation, when we started, you did allude to the fact that this policy has been muddled up in a lot of politics, and some said it was done in order to reduce incidences of vote buying, in order not to make the election free for all, for politicians to just go out there and buy votes. We witnessed the first half of the elections that took place, the presidential elections and the parliamentary elections, on the 25th of February. And I must say, from the feelers and the reports that we're getting, that there were quite a number of low incidences of vote buying. So would you say it achieved its intended purpose when it comes to the issue of vote buying?
Maybe yes and maybe no. Nigerians, we are always very smart in corruption. We are always one step ahead of the policy. Vote buying for a while now has taken a different shape. So if the intention of the policy was to reduce money transaction in terms of using cash to buy votes, I think this time around the politicians were a bit smarter than the policy, because we also saw there are reports about how politicians were collecting bank accounts, of the poor. Because incidentally now, very many Nigerians, even in the informal sector, have bank accounts. If you don't have a bank account, they tell you, give us the bank account of somebody that you trust. And there are many incidences. I personally witnessed some incidences in Kaduna where people came around to my community asking for names and bank accounts for transfer. So they did this. Vote buying went on. Irrespective of the policy. And there are other ways. People are also giving out foodstuff, and the foodstuff that they have used their own, they have transferred huge amounts of cash to a wholesaler or to a distributor to supply them, and they have some of these things were distributed behind closed doors. So maybe we need to do some assessment of what was the shape votes buying this time around, and what were the alternatives? There were other alternatives. It may have reduced it to a large extent. It could have reduced it. To a large extent. Nevertheless, vote buying still occurred, and we witnessed it in different ways.
Now, Madam, if you can, in less than a minute, because we're fast running out of time, when will Nigerians start to see the benefits of this policy? And when do you expect the informal economy to recover from this shock that was caused by this Naira redesign policy?
Fortunately, the informal economy is very fast in picking up, very fast in being destroyed by policy, and they can also be fast in picking up. And what do I mean by that? A petty trader, once she's able to have access to her 5,000 Naira from the bank, she picks up. But then a lot of money, profit has been lost. And I think that between now and December, we should see recovery. Hoping that everything being equal, before the end of December, we should see recovery. We should see businesses that have been badly affected, managing to bounce back again. hopefully that with the new government, or as we go into the next phase, that there will be something in the economy that is also, there's going to be another kind of program or policy that will rejig the economy at the macro level, so that it will trickle down, at least some benefits will also trickle down at the micro level for the poor, for those that are heavily, affected, particularly the small businesses in the informal sector, for them to also have some benefits and rejig their economy at that level. So we hope that between now and December, certainly there'll be a rejig of the economy, and there will be some livening up of those sectors that have been so seriously affected in the past few months.
Thank you very much, Madam Hawa Mustafa, Development Policy Analyst. It's been an absolute pleasure having you join us on Politics Headquarters. We do appreciate your insights, your time and contribution. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.